The morning was quiet, too quiet for a place that once echoed with war. Lieutenant Greg Fallon stood on the porch of his old outpost hut, a rusted shotgun in one hand and a mug of cold coffee in the other. The war was over, but the land still felt broken, like it was holding its breath. Greg was trying to forget, trying to live simply with his only friend left, his dog. Max, a strong, loyal German shepherd with scars just like his own. Max barked once, sharp and loud, then ran toward the edge of the nearby woods. Greg frowned, set down his coffee, and grabbed his rifle. "Max, come back," he shouted, but Max didn't listen. He never barked unless it was serious. That meant something or someone was out there. The forest was thick, dry, and filled with old landmines that never exploded. Greg moved carefully, boots crunching on the dead leaves, his heart beating faster with each step. Max's barking grew louder, but also more urgent, more desperate. Then suddenly, silence. Greg froze, raising his weapon. That's when he saw her. A figure lay crumpled at the base of a tree, half covered in dirt and dried blood. She was alien clearly. Her skin was a light violet, glowing faintly. Even in the morning sun, her clothes were torn armor, the kind Greg remembered from the enemy's elite units. Her breathing was shallow, but she was alive, barely. Greg aimed the rifle at her head, finger tight on the trigger. One command from his brain, and she'd be gone. Just another forgotten enemy. But then Max did something strange. He walked over and gently licked her hand. "What the hell, Max?" Greg muttered, lowering his rifle a little. The alien girl slowly opened her eyes, glowing like starlight, and stared right at him. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Then she weakly lifted one hand, holding something between her fingers, a small, glowing stone. No bigger than a coin. She pushed it toward him, and then collapsed again. Unconscious, Greg didn't know what to do. She should have been dead. Her kind had killed dozens of his friends, burned villages, and destroyed entire cities. But she was here, alone, dying, and Max trusted her. He knelt beside her, rifle still ready. But his hands shook as he reached for the stone. The moment he touched it, he felt a strange warmth crawl through his skin. Images flashed in his mind, cities burning, ships falling, and then her, standing alone in the middle of it all, crying, "What did you just show me?" Greg whispered, backing away. The stone went dark in his hand. He looked at the girl again. Blood was pouring slowly from a deep wound on her side. Greg cursed under his breath, then pulled off his jacket and wrapped it around her wound to slow the bleeding. "I must be crazy," he said, shaking his head. He lifted her carefully. Placing her over his shoulder, Max trotted beside him, wagging his tail like everything was fine. Back at the hut, Greg laid her on the old couch and locked every door and window. He checked the scanner, no signals nearby. No other life forms. Still, something didn't feel right. Why was she alone? Why wasn't she armed? And why did that glowing stone feel so human? She woke briefly during the night, her voice barely a whisper. Leora must tell the truth. Leaned closer. What truth? What's Leora? She passed out again before she could answer. Greg sat back in the chair beside her, rifle across his lap, and Max curled up at his feet. He stared at the glowing stone on the table. It pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. He didn't know what was coming next, but something had changed. The war might have ended, but the truth behind it was just waking up. And it all started because of one dog's warning. Greg didn't sleep that night. He watched the alien girl breathe, watched the way Max stayed close to her, guarding her like she was family. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, and deep in Greg's gut, he knew tomorrow would not be peaceful. She wasn't supposed to still be breathing. Not after that kind of wound, not after lying out there for what looked like days. Greg Fallon had seen death, smelled it, touched it. But this alien girl, this enemy, kept pulling in tiny, shaky breaths like something inside her refused to give up. Greg sat on the edge of his creaky old bed, staring at her. Her violet skin had turned pale. Too pale. Even the glowing patterns across her arms were fading. But Max wouldn't leave her side. The dog sat like a soldier on duty, watching over her, tail still, ears alert. He had never done that for anyone, not even Greg. Greg didn't understand it. He didn't want to understand it. She was the enemy. And yet, here she was, in his cabin, sleeping in his blanket, bleeding on his floor. And worst of all, she was whispering things that didn't make sense, names that didn't belong to her kind. Words in human tongue. Leora. Greg. Not. Enemy. Danger, she mumbled again, barely audible. Greg leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. What did you say? He asked, even though he knew she couldn't answer him fully. She moved slightly, then went still again. He turned away, running his hand through his short, graying hair. This is insane, he muttered. I should have called the patrol, turned her in, but deep down, he knew why he didn't. The war had left scars on both sides, but something about her didn't feel like a soldier. She looked like someone left behind, discarded. Greg walked to the table and picked up the strange stone she had given him. It no longer glowed, but something inside it pulsed faintly, like a machine. Or maybe something alive when he held it close to his ear. He thought he heard a voice, a child's voice. Crying suddenly, Max growled low. Deep in his throat, Greg turned quickly. Grabbing his rifle from the wall, the girl hadn't moved, but her arm was glowing again, softly. A golden ring of symbols appeared on her wrist, blinking like a warning light. What now? Greg whispered, eyes scanning the room. Then he looked down. His scanner, still plugged into the wall, was blinking. Red, unregistered signal detected. Tracking. 034 remaining. His heart skipped. Someone was tracking her, and they were less than a minute away. Greg moved fast, switching off every system in the cabin. He covered the windows, cut the power, and threw a thermal blanket over the girl to mask. Her heat signature, Max sat near the door, teeth bared, ready to fight. But Greg crouched beside the girl again, pressing a finger gently to her lips. Who's coming for you? He asked in a harsh whisper. She blinked weakly, looked at him, then mouthed a single word. Us. Greg froze. Us. What did that mean? Before he could ask again, the scanner died. Its battery drained. A shadow moved past the window. Greg raised his rifle, took a deep breath, and waited. But the door never opened. No sound, no knock, no weapon, fire. Only Max moved, walking slowly toward the girl and laying his head on her chest. Like he was making sure she was still alive. The tension in the room held like a stretched wire. Greg watched the door for what felt like hours, then finally lowered his weapon, confused and angry. Whoever was tracking her didn't want to be seen, but they knew where she was now, and they'd be back. Greg looked at her again. Her eyes closed, face peaceful, despite the danger outside. She shouldn't be alive, but she was, and something about that, about her, was going to change everything. He stood up, locked the door, and whispered to himself, "All right, alien girl. Let's find out what secret you're hiding." Greg didn't sleep. He sat at the small wooden table in his hut, staring at the glowing wristband he had carefully removed from the alien girl's arm. It had stopped blinking now, but the last thing it displayed kept repeating in his mind coordinates. Deep in the western wastelands, he typed them into his old military map, a cracked digital tablet he hadn't used since the ceasefire. The location lit up red. Classified zone, no entry. Former strike site 47. His blood ran cold. He remembered that place barely. It was one of the last missions before the war ended. And rumors said something had gone wrong there. Very wrong, but no one ever spoke of it again. Officially, Strike Site 47 didn't exist, and now a dying alien enemy had handed him its exact location. Greg looked at her, still sleeping on his couch, breathing shallow but steady. Max had curled up next to her like a furry bodyguard. Refusing to move, Greg poured water into a bowl for the dog. But Max didn't touch it. He was watching her closely. Like he understood something Greg didn't. Greg walked back to the table and stared at the map again. Those coordinates weren't random. They meant something hidden. And then a strange thought crossed his mind. What if this girl wasn't the enemy at all? What if she was the only one who survived whatever happened at Site 47? His thoughts were interrupted when the girl suddenly sat up. Gasping, her eyes glowing bright gold, she clutched her chest. Breathing like she had just escaped drowning, Greg jumped up, startled, gun in hand. "Hey." "Easy," he said, stepping forward. She looked around in confusion. Eyes wide, hands shaking, Greg didn't know what to say. She was awake and she looked scared, not dangerous. Where am I?" She whispered in broken English, her voice raspy. "My cabin." "You were dying out there? My dog found you?" Greg replied. Nodding toward Max, she turned and looked at Max with soft eyes. Then back at Greg. "You're human," she said slowly. "But you didn't kill me." "No," Greg said simply. "Because you didn't try to kill me either." She blinked, as if confused by that answer. Then she looked down at her wrist. Her eyes widened in shock. "The beacon," she muttered. "They know I'm here." "Who?" Greg asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she looked him dead in the eyes and said, "If they find me, they'll kill you too." Greg lowered his gun slowly. "What happened at those coordinates?" he asked, his voice firm but calm. She stared at him for a moment, then said one word. "Leora." Greg's eyes narrowed. He'd heard that name before, whispered in a drunken conversation among soldiers. It wasn't a person, it was a project, a secret weapon both sides had denied ever creating. But now, the enemy girl was saying it like it was real, like it was still alive. "You know what Leora is?" he asked. She nodded, trembling. "I was part of it," she said. "But I wasn't supposed to survive." Greg sat back down slowly. Everything was falling apart inside his mind. The war he fought, the orders he followed, the people he trusted. "Why give me the coordinates?" he asked her quietly. "Because your name is on the list," she replied. "What list?" "The list of humans they feared," she said. "You were meant to die at Site 47. But they never found you." Max stood up, growling low. Ears pointed toward the front door. The girl turned her head, her face tightening. "They're coming," she said. "They're not going to knock this time." Greg grabbed his rifle again and peered out the small window in the distance. A faint blue light flickered in the sky as scout drone. He cursed under his breath. "Why would they come after you now?" "Because I know what Leora is," she whispered. "And you're the only one left who can stop it." Greg looked at her, then at Max, who barked once sharp and clear. He had a choice now. Hand her over, or follow the trail of secrets she was leading him into, and something in his gut told him. This wasn't just about an alien girl anymore. This was about the truth behind the war. The kind of truth that could burn governments to the ground. He grabbed a backpack, stuffed it with food, weapons, and gear. Then looked at her and said, "We're going to those coordinates." She nodded. Tears in her strange eyes, and outside, the wind began to howl across the wasteland, again like it knew what was coming. The cabin fell silent after nightfall. Too silent. No wind, no crickets, no distant hum from old drones, just the thick, heavy stillness that only came before something bad. Greg sat near the window, rifle in his lap, watching shadows dance outside under the moonlight. The alien girl, now cleaned and dressed in an old military shirt, slept quietly under a blanket. Max lay beside the couch, unmoving, but his ears twitched every few seconds. He sensed it too. They're watching. Greg whispered without looking at her. I know, she replied, her voice calm now. They always watch before they strike. Greg turned, eyebrows raised. You sound like you've seen this before. She didn't answer. Instead, she pulled something from her belt, a small, black cube, placed it on the floor. It lit up, projecting a thin blue barrier around the cabin's inner walls. What is that? A dampener, she said. It hides our heat signatures for a few minutes. Minutes. Greg repeated, that's not much. It's all I had left. Greg's grip tightened on the rifle. Max suddenly stood up, staring at the door, tail stiff. Then they heard it clink, clink, clink. Footsteps, slow, heavy metal against dirt. Greg mouthed the words, get down. The girl slid off the couch and rolled behind the table. Staying low, Max didn't bark this time. He just growled, a deep, rumbling sound that vibrated through the wooden floorboards. Then bang. The cabin wall exploded inward, showering them with splinters and dust. Greg was already moving, rolling toward the back of the room, pulling the girl with him. Max lunged into the dust cloud, barking wildly. Flashes of red light lit up the room. Laser sights cutting through smoke. Greg fired back twice. Hearing one grunt before a figure dropped, shadows entered the cabin, tall, armored beings, not like the girl. They moved fast and silent. No shouting, no talking. Trained killers. Not soldiers, mercs. Greg shouted, they're not military, they're hunters. They're after the cube. The girl screamed, clutching the black device from the floor. Greg tossed a flashbang toward the center of the cabin and covered the girl with his body. Flash. The room lit up like daylight. Shouts followed. Then silence again. When Greg opened his eyes, the attackers were gone. One lay dead on the ground, armor cracked open by Max's teeth. Max limped back into view, blood on his mouth. They ran until their legs felt like stone, through the whispering forest, past broken roads. Under skies that flickered with patrol lights, Greg's boots were soaked with mud. The alien girl's arm was bleeding again, and Max limped but refused to stop. None of them spoke, not even once, but in the silence. One name kept echoing in Greg's mindly aura. He didn't know why the name made his chest tighten. He didn't remember ever hearing it during the war. And yet, it felt personal, too personal, like it had once meant everything. They finally stopped beneath the ruins of an old satellite station. It was half buried in sand, rusted and forgotten, but it would give them cover for the night. Greg lit a small heat stone while the girl collapsed beside Max, resting her head on his fur. He didn't push her for answers. He just sat across from her, watching, waiting, listening to the wind pass through shattered metal. After a long while, she spoke. I shouldn't have said the name, she whispered. You weren't supposed to remember. Greg leaned forward. But I don't remember. Not really. She looked up at him, eyes glowing faintly again. No, but your soul does, she said. You were part of the original team. Greg blinked, confused. What team? She hesitated, then pulled something from her pocket, a folded piece of paper. Old and cracked, human paper, not alien tech. She opened it slowly and passed it to him. Greg held it under the heatstone's glow. His fingers trembled as he stared down at it. A photo. Taken long ago, 7 people in worn combat suits stood side by side, smiling through bruises, and right in the center, Greg himself. Much younger, arms crossed, face hard. But there was someone else in the photo, a woman beside him with silver hair and soft violet eyes, human features, but not quite. She wasn't from Earth. She was the one smiling the brightest. Who is she? Greg whispered. The girl replied gently. That's Leora. She's not a place. No, she said. She's a person. And also something more. Greg stared harder at the photo, trying to break through the fog in his mind. I don't remember her, he said, almost angry. Why don't I remember? The alien girl Leia, as she'd earlier told him, placed her hand over his. Because they took it from you, she said softly. They erased you, Greg, and they erased her. He pulled his hand away. Confused and shaking, I was just a soldier, he snapped. I followed orders. I survived. Leia didn't flinch. She didn't, she whispered. She sacrificed herself to keep what they built from falling into Syndicate hands. Greg swallowed hard. What did they build? Leia hesitated again, then answered slowly. A being created from human and alien DNA. A mind that could link both species. A bridge between worlds. They called her a weapon, but she was just girl. A girl who loved a soldier. Greg's eyes widened. You're saying I loved her? Leia nodded. She whispered your name when they pulled her away. They erased her, eh? And they erased you. So no one would remember the bond. Max whimpered and rested his head on Greg's knee, as if reminding him something was still inside, something still real. Greg leaned back against the metal wall, eyes closed, mind spinning. Why bring all this back now? Leia's voice was sad but steady because the Syndicate found traces of her neural code. They want to rebuild her, turn her into a weapon. Greg clenched his fists. And what do you want? He asked. I want to help you remember, she said. Because if you don't, no one else can stop what's coming. Greg looked down at the photo again, and for a moment, just a flicker, he remembered the sound of her laugh, soft like wind chimes in the rain. And the way she held his hand during storms, he didn't know how, but his heart knew it was real. He stood up slowly, eyes locked on the horizon. We finish this, he said. We go to the core of Site 47. Leia stood beside him, wobbling but stronger now. You might not like what you find there, she warned. Greg nodded. But it's time, he said. Time to remember who she really was and who I used to be. Asterisk, the desert wind howled across the broken road as dawn broke over the wasteland. Greg walked ahead, boots kicking up dust. Rifle slung over his back. Leia limped behind him, her breathing shaky but determined. Max trotted between them, tired, bandaged, but alert. They were heading straight towards Site 47. Toward the truth buried in a crater the world forgot. The sky was clear now, no more drones in sight. The Syndicate had pulled back for now, but everyone knew the silence never lasted long. As they moved across a dried riverbed, Max suddenly stopped. He barked once and looked up at Greg. Greg paused, raising an eyebrow. What is it, boy? Max barked again, then ran a few steps forward and began digging in the sand with his paws. Greg ran over, confused, and dropped to one knee. Beneath the dry surface was something hard metallic. They dug together until the shape appeared. Hey? Small black box with silver corners, half buried and humming softly. Greg wiped the dust from it, and a screen lit up on its surface. Its voice ID required. A soft female voice echoed from the device. Greg flinched. The voice felt familiar, too familiar. It made his chest tighten with something close to pain. Then the screen flashed. Scan accepted. Welcome back, Captain Fallon. Greg's hand trembled. Captain? He whispered. I was a lieutenant. Leia crouched beside him, eyes wide. They changed your rank after they wiped your memory, she said softly. You were one of the project leaders. The box clicked open, revealing a tiny chip inside. Glowing pale blue, Greg carefully picked it up, unsure of what it was. But Max walked forward and sat down. Raising his head, without a word. Leia reached out and gently pressed the chip against the tag on Max's collar. A soft tone beeped, and a hologram burst out from the dog's collar. A floating image, blurry at first, then clear. It was her, Leora. She looked young, no older than 20, with silver hair and calm eyes. She smiled gently, and her voice rang out. "If you're seeing this, it means you finally remembered, Greg. I'm sorry I left you behind, but they were going to use me. I had to hide a part of myself somewhere they'd never look inside your dog's neural tag." Greg stared at the image, his legs frozen, heart pounding. The voice was real. The warmth, the way she said his name, everything. He had known her. He had loved her. The message continued. "You were the only one I trusted. They erased you to erase me, but I knew you'd find me again. This chip holds the final memory core of Project Leora and the kill code that..." The sun was rising behind them, painting the desert in fire and gold. But ahead, only silence waited. The half-buried vault of Site-47 stood like a scar on the earth, its doors twisted, scorched and sealed for decades. Until now, Greg, Leia, and Max stood before the entrance, their shadows stretching long and thin. The kill code chip, now glowing inside Greg's rifle, pulsed like a heartbeat. Leia looked at the ground, her voice low. "This is where she died." Greg nodded slowly. "And where she can finally rest." They stepped forward together. Past old bones and rusted weapons, Max growled low once, but not in fear. It was warning as they reached the heavy door. A soft voice echoed from nowhere. "Greg Fallon. Access confirmed." The doors hissed open, releasing a breath of stale, cold air inside. It was dark, quiet, untouched. Dust floated like ghosts, and in the center of the room stood a glass tube, cracked but still lit. Inside it, a shape curled in sleep. Leora, or what was left of her. Leia stepped forward, her hand pressed to the glass. "She's not awake," she said, "but the neural core inside, it's still alive." Greg approached slowly, placing his hand next to hers. The two palms, one human, one alien, side by side on the glass. "She was the bridge," Greg whispered. "We made her to unite two worlds, not to destroy them." A console blinked nearby, showing Leora's vitals. Everything still working, until it flickered. Red incoming signal detected. Greg's heart dropped. "They're here." Outside, the desert rumbled. Dropships, engines screaming, shadows flying overhead. The Syndicate had come, and they weren't hiding this time. "We don't have much time," Leia said, pulling a data cable from her belt. "If we upload the kill code now, she can't be used again." Greg stared at Leora's face, inside the glass, peaceful, gentle, and glowing. Like she was dreaming of something better. He hesitated. "Are we ending her, or setting her free?" Before Leia could answer, the roof above them exploded. Syndicate soldiers dropped down, armored and armed, weapons raised. "Get away from the core," one shouted, but Max leaped first, biting the leg of the lead soldier, throwing him off balance. Blasts fired, sparks flew. Greg spun around and shot two mercs down, pulling Leia behind the tube. "We can't hold them," she cried. Greg slammed his hand on the console. "Upload the code now." But before the code could start, a sudden voice echoed from inside the glass. Soft, female, calm. "Leora, Greg. Is that you?" Greg froze. "Leora." The voice was weak, but real. "I'm tired. I don't want to be used again, but I don't want to be forgotten either." Greg's hand trembled on the button. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. She answered with a whisper. "Let me go, Greg. But remember me." Tears burned in his eyes. He gave Leia a look. She nodded silently. Greg pressed the final command. The kill code uploaded, flooding the system, erasing the data, severing the neural links. Leora's eyes opened, one silver and bright, then slowly closed for the last time. The glass dimmed, the hum stopped, and the room Fell silent outside. The syndicate ships turned away, losing their signal, retreating, defeated, inside. Only the three remained: man, dog, and alien, and the ghost of a girl who once wanted peace. Greg fell to his knees, exhausted. Max lay beside him, resting his head in his lap. Leia touched the glass tube gently. She saved more lives today than she ever did during the war. Greg nodded. She was never a weapon.